Thank you very much, John. Welcome, everybody. Welcome back to face-to-face events. It is great to be back. Yes, Jim Morrish from Transforma Insights, and I'm going to talk about sustainability in IoT and then drill down a little bit into the areas that are particularly relevant for LoRaWAN. So I have a presentation and some slides. If the clicker does work, excellent. So, top level summary, IoT can enable a range of sustainability benefits, including reductions in electricity and hydrocarbon fuel consumption and also water usage. We're going to talk about I'm going to talk about how LoRaWAN is a key connectivity option for IoT and how it enables some of those savings. And how it can be deployed for maximum sustainability impact. So I'm Jim Morrish, I'm a founding partner of Transforma Insights. We're a firm of industry analysts. We're recently formed. I do claim, however, to be the person who named the LPWA space, so I have been involved in this for a while. One slide about Transforma Insights, if you'll forgive me. So we're a new industry analyst firm, launched in 2019. It's our second time around. The previous version, Makina Research, we sold to Gartner in 2016. So this is the new version. We are evidence-based, and looking at understanding best practice, looking at best practice in end-user adoption, in vendors supporting those end-user needs, develop very granular forecasts and provide insight on technology trends against a framework which you'll see on the right, and it's certainly illegible, but there's a copy of that on our website, and basically it's a list of technologies and use cases enabled by those technologies, and we look at how those things come together. Enough of that, and on to the content. But I'm going to have to give you one more piece of background here around how we build our IoT forecasts, because the IoT forecasts underpin some of the analyses, or almost all of the analyses I'm going to relay to you in this presentation. So we have some extremely granular bottom-up forecasts of IoT, and what I've got here on the left-hand side is a framework of three families of use cases, including 27 use cases in the blue. 71 application groups in the outlined green, and underneath those are some more detailed applications. And you'll see these broken out. In fact, here we've got broken out road traffic monitoring and control, which is broken out into road pricing and traffic monitoring and traffic lights and various components. And we actually forecast at that bottom green levels. There's about 250 different IoT applications we forecast for every market worldwide for various verticals, add that up to get to a total. So very granular. What that means we can do is we can take each one of those 250 applications and say, what's the sustainability impact of it? And also look at the profile of how it's connected, which is how we can see the impact that LoRa might have. So for each one of those 250 odd applications, we've looked at the sustainability and impact in terms of electricity consumption, hydrocarbon consumption, i.e. fuel, water usage, and CO2 generation. Now I've focused on IoT here, but clearly many of these IoT solutions also include edge, and they're enabled by AI and other technologies. So this isn't just IoT, but IoT is where the world of IT meets the wider world. So, and it's in the wider world where savings of electricity and fuel and so on are made. So really IoT represents the most impactful of the new emerging technologies. One piece of background before we go on to the results, it's worth noticing a lifestyle perspective on sustainability. And what I've got here is a chart which looks through manufacturing, distribution, operations, and end of life of an IoT solution. And clearly, in the manufacturing stage and the distribution stage and the end-of-life stage, IoT is a net negative contribution. It takes energy to manufacture these things, to distribute these things, but in the operation stage phase, they can enable savings, and that's the bit we're going to focus on. It's worth noting, though, that not all applications do enable savings. So, for instance, something like an IoT connected television, if you've got an 8K HD IoT connected television, that's just a cost. I mean, there's more hardware, there's more power consumption, there's network communications, there's servers on the back end when you watch something on demand. However, compare that to something like fleet, where there is potential, or fleet management, where there's potential to save some significant amounts of fuel. So not everything's positive, many things are. So, some top level results. just the number of connections, connected devices by the end of 2030 to provide some context. And you'll remember that this 29.3 billion figure is based on the aggregation of the 250 applications across every country in the world, all added up, and looking at the connectivity that supports each one of those devices. So it's just worth looking at this at a top level. So total global IoT connections growing from 11.3 billion at the end of 2021 to 29.3. Short range dominates. A lot of connected devices are found in buildings, and they're just on Wi-Fi connections or Ethernet connections and so on. Cellular, excluding MMTC, those are the LPWA versions of cellular connectivity, goes from 9% to 8% of connections. The MMTC technologies, those are the cellular versions of LPWA, including LTE-M and NB-IoT and so on, increased from 3% to 9%. So overall, the cellular share is growing, but it's migrating across those MMTC technologies. And the non-MMTC LPWA, and that's the bit that includes LoRaWAN and also the likes of Sigfox and some other relatively fragmented technologies, but really a lot of it is LoRaWAN, or the vast majority is LoRaWAN. That share grows from 1.5% to 4.6%, and just to note that LPWA overall grows from 5% to 13%. So the piece that's particularly interesting is the blue slice on that chart. That's the particularly relevant piece that we're going to talk about today. Again, another top level conclusion. So this is across all the new emerging technologies, dominated by IoT. We're looking at the electricity and fuel impact, and you will see that the electricity saved and fuel saved bars are quite high on the left hand side. So quite a significant amount of energy is saved with IoT, and particularly when it's enhanced with AI. So there's around 5 petawatt hours of energy in 2030 saved, of which about 1.6 petawatt hours is electricity and 3.4 is fuel. And there's also about 230 billion meters cubed of water saved with IoT. So now let's look at another dynamic behind here. So I mentioned the connected TV and comparing that to fleet. That effect replicates itself across almost all IoT applications. The consumer IoT applications tend to be configured, or IoT tends to be used to enhance a proposition. And make it more user-friendly and more functional. On the enterprise side, IoT projects tend to be deployed to increase efficiency or for net economic benefit. And the consequence of that tends to be reducing costs, reducing resources, reducing consumption of things like electricity and fuel. So net enterprise applications are more positively beneficial than consumer in general. There are some indirect effects related to the avoidance of costs in related areas. So, for instance, in something like agriculture, if you can reduce the lost rate in a supply chain, then effectively the resources that went into generating those that agricultural produce, which was ultimately wasted, those resources are not wasted. So reducing losses in supply chain and making operations more efficient overall, and just reducing loss rates can actually have a sustainability benefit as well. So there are some indirect effects in there as well. Drilling down a little, chart on the left-hand side is the most impactful consumer applications. On the right-hand side, it's the most impactful enterprise applications, and they're ordered by the scale of impact. So you can see that on the consumer side, there are things like heating, ventilation, air conditioning, and building automation that have a positive impact. Beyond that, there are many things that actually net contribute to electricity consumption. Whereas on the right-hand side, in the enterprise context, you can see almost all applications, almost all the top applications actually reduce energy consumption. And you'll notice that CCTV pops up above the line there. because that actually increases electricity consumption, but there's a corresponding save on fuel consumption, because if you have CCTV and you float AI over that and you use that to monitor to monitor an area and perform security tasks, then you don't need a security guard, and the security guard doesn't have to travel there. So there are savings in hydrocarbon fuels at the cost of a little investment in electricity. And well, firstly, one offsets the other, because there's more saving in fuel than there is in cost in electricity. And secondly, just migrating energy consumption from hydrocarbon fuel to electricity is beneficial in itself, because it's possible to generate electricity from renewable sources, or certainly far more easily than fuel. So on to just drilling down now into the non-MMTC piece. So this is the bit that is overwhelmingly LoRaWAN. And we're looking at electricity saved with non-MMTC LPWA solutions. And what I've got on the left-hand side here is just for reference, it's the non-MMTC percentage of connections. These should be percentages. So that's a little under 5% on the left-hand side. That's the number that we saw on that stacked chart at the beginning. And the little blue slice that I said was the relevant piece for this presentation. So approaching 5% of connections, but round about 12% of electricity savings, and that's against total savings of about 1.8 petawatt hours in 2030. So there's about approaching around about 12% of that is non-MMTC. The big applications that contribute to that are electricity smart grid, electricity smart meters, power generation, crop management, livestock management, building automation control systems, public space lighting, and a bunch of others. And just an example of something of a LoRa-based application that's relevant here. Orion M2M used LoRaWAN for smart metering in Kazakhstan. They reduced technical losses by 10% of electricity and 15% on water. Those are pretty significant saves, frankly. Looking next at fuel consumption. Same thing on the left-hand side. I've got the non-MMTC percentage of IoT connections and also the percentage of fuel saves. You'll see here that non-MMTC under-indexes, so it is less impactful than other technologies on average are in terms of fuel saving. That's primarily because LoRaWAN and these unlicensed or license-exempt LPWA technologies are less suitable or less well suited to moving assets, and it's moving assets that tend to consume the fuel at a top level. But the main drivers of saving are things like stock level monitoring, road pricing infrastructure, gas smart meters, track and trace of assets, so you know where assets are, traffic lights, connected road signs, crop management, and so on, and quite a long tail in there as well. And just an example there, so there's a city there which deployed LoRaWAN to support smart parking, reduce the time to find a parking space by 50%. And clearly that's a reduction in time that people are spending sitting in vehicles, crawling through traffic and just burning fuel, really for no purpose at all. It's just wasted. So that's avoided, and that can be a very significant saving. Onto water, and you'll see that the license-exempt LPWA technologies very much over-index in terms of savings of water. So again, about 4.7% of connections, but approaching 30% of the water savings that are generated by all IoT. Very significant share there, very strong over-indexing. And that is primarily because it is so easy to pop up a LoRaWAN network to cover an agricultural location, something like a farm, whether that's a livestock farm or a crop-focused farm. It's just very easy to pop those networks up and effectively have a private network and just monitor things and just manage crops and water them when they need watering in the locations that they need watering, and control irrigation systems in greenhouses and so on and so forth. So the main of the savings there come from things like crop management, crop irrigation systems, livestock management. Also, water smart grid is quite impactful, water smart meters, and there's a few others, but it's very much driven by agriculture and the suitability of LoRa for agriculture. Looking at those three pieces, electricity, hydrocarbon fuel consumption, and water consumption, the impact on those, you can aggregate those together and say, well, what's the impact on CO2? Now, it's a little more complex than just adding them together because the CO2 generated by electricity generation varies from country to country. In Iceland, it's all renewable electricity. There's no CO2 generated by electricity as a result of electricity generation. In somewhere like India or China, it's very different. So there is a variance by country, but taking that into account and looking at the other sustainability impacts, it's possible to estimate the impact that license-exempt IoT technologies can have on CO2. And again, we've got the total number of non-MMTC connections, and we've got the license-exempt savings, and you can see that these technologies, as a group, over-index in terms of their impact. Main contributors to that are electricity smart grid, electricity smart meters, stock level monitoring, power generation, road pricing infrastructure, track and trace again, traffic lights, etc. So a disproportionate impact in terms of sustainability. And that brings us to some conclusions. So, clearly some IoT applications are significantly more beneficial than others in terms of sustainability impact. Some of these things are just a pure cost. I mentioned 8K HD TV earlier, and if you consume content on demand, it's just placing a lot of demand on cloud servers, consuming a lot of power. Compare that to watching the same content real time as it's broadcast. Very different sustainability footprint. But net overall, IoT applications are more beneficial. Overall, within that, though, there are some that are particularly impactful. There's a related message to that it is worth focusing. It is worth the tech industry focusing on making these applications run more effectively. It's no good saying that IoT overall is beneficial. It's appropriate to also focus on resource consumption in data centers, etc. And for instance, someone like Google has achieved 40% energy reduction in their data centers in terms of in HVAC usage, just by using AI and better planning loads across their servers. So there are significant saves to be made there. So we'd want to do those as well as have the positive IoT impact of the solutions. LoRaWAN is particularly well suited to a range of IoT monitoring applications, and that can have a high sustainability impact. Generally, it over-indexes in terms of impact compared to other technologies. The impact on agriculture in terms of water savings is particularly significant, and note that hydrocarbon fuel savings are more important than electricity savings, because electricity can be generated via renewables. So if you substitute hydrocarbon consumption or you substitute electricity consumption for something that was previously hydrocarbon consumption, that's beneficial in and of itself, just because you're making things, because electricity can be sourced renewably. It's worth also noting that saving water in some areas is far more impactful than others. So if you're saving water in California or in the Gulf states, that's much more impactful than saving it in certain other, and potentially somewhere like Malaysia, which is characterized by quite a lot of rain and water. So there's a lot of complexity behind this, but overall, very positive. And that really was what I wanted to say. I think I'm out of time now. I don't know if I have time for questions, but if I do, I'm happy to take one, or after the session. I guess not.
Vendors will actually survive
What should you focus? So the question is, I think, to check I've got this right. What are the applications to focus on? Which are the most impactful applications?
Oh yeah, in current market situation.
In the current market situation, things like fleet are probably most fleet management. So if you put a device in a vehicle, in a fleet vehicle, and you can plan the route more effectively, you can combine loads, so you're making less trips. If you combine that, and you can also monitor driver behavior, so they're not accelerating harshly, braking harshly, so you lower the fuel consumption overall. You also lower fuel theft, which is a save from an enterprise perspective, but not from a society perspective. And also you can back that, you can integrate those fleet management solutions into wider enterprise processes, such as, for instance, stock level monitoring and stock level forecasting, etc. So you can manage the flow of goods much more efficiently through the supply chain. Those are probably the most impactful areas. But really the answer will be different for every company. If it's a firm of emergency repair plumbers, that's going to be less relevant than if the company is someone like a Walmart, which has a very steady, stable flow of goods through a big network, and they're quite different things. So as always with IoT, what to focus on, I think, is an individual answer for an individual company. But there are clearly opportunities there.